Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. As Christmas is getting closer, we've got all kinds of interesting things for you today. We've got a dynamite revelation of what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. You don't want to miss that. But you also don't want to miss the fact that our buddy, Joe Bastardi, he told you what was going to happen, and it has happened. He said there was going to be a super cold winter this year, and then he said we're going to have storms in the Midwest after the super cold.
I think we're just getting started.
Just getting a powerful storm dumped a foot of snow in the Midwest, causing travel chaos, leaving people stranded in the airports. Joe, you listen to this program, and we asked Joe, and Joe knows.
Joe tells us all.
Joe knows it. He says we'll be skiing on Mount Trashmore. That's yet to come. All right.
Well, now that storm is heading to the northeast. It's bringing snow to upstate New York, up into Maine, and forecasters have issued flood warnings for New York City and Philadelphia. Heather Sells has the story.
The storm is hitting New England hard today with either rain or heavy snow, depending on the region. It has already pummeled the Midwest and destroyed travel plans for thousands.
Oh, man, it's been hectic, bro. Really bad, really terrible.
The storm slammed the Chicago area with up to a foot of wet snow. It led to whiteout conditions and scores of accidents on roads across the Midwest. The storm is blamed for at least one death on the slick roads. In Kansas, the governor declared a state of disaster emergency.
It's bad out here. The visibility is probably less than a couple car lengths in front of us.
At one point, the blizzard conditions were so severe, they forced authorities to close most of Interstate 70 in Kansas.
We are literally driving and cannot see anything.
Some drivers simply abandoned their cars. High winds also played havoc, ripping the top off this 18-wheeler. Those who had hoped to fly out of Kansas and Chicago on Monday found themselves joining a host of stranded passengers, many who spent more than one night in the airport.
I've been bumped twice. I can't even rent a car.
Chicago's O'Hare Airport canceled more than 1,200 flights on Monday. That after it canceled 700 on Sunday. And the storm is expected to produce lake effect snow of up to 10 inches or more around Lakes Erie and Ontario. Gusty winds will continue in both New England and the Midwest, creating dangerous travel through the middle of the week. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Hey, listen, it's an inconvenient truth. Where's Al Gore when we need him? Honestly, we're supposed to have global warming. How come it's not warm? This is going to be one of the coldest winters. How come it's cold? Because there are no sunspots. What controls it? They don't have SUVs on the sun. They don't have SUVs in Mars. They don't have them. It's not all man-made. A lot of it has to do with the planetary shift that we've got going on and the winds that result therefrom. But anyhow, there's something that's really shocking, though, that went on that scientists are really upset about, because a report that a Chinese researcher has actually helped to make the world's first genetically edited babies and has entered into the DNA of the embryos to change them. And people all over the planet are alarmed about it. John Jessup has that story.
That's right, Pat. The reaction was swift and often negative after a Chinese researcher made the stunning claim about the genetically modified babies. Many experts warn it's a dangerous step in both science and ethics. Ephraim Graham has that story.
The researcher says he used a powerful gene editing tool to alter the DNA of the twin girls born this month. He claims the tool gave their embryos the ability to resist possible future infection with the AIDS virus.
I feel a strong responsibility that it's not just to make it first, but also make it as example how to perform like this, consider morality of the society, and consider its impact to the public.
His work has not yet been independently confirmed or reviewed by other scientists, but if proven true, it crosses into a new frontier of medicine and ethics. Gene editing is banned in the United States because the DNA changes can pass to future generations, and it risks harming other genes. Most mainstream scientists think it's too unsafe to try, and some denounce the Chinese report as human experimentation.
We still have a lot of work to do to prove and establish that the procedure is actually safe. I would say that no babies should be born at this point in time following the use of this technology. It's simply too early, too premature.
Some worry the procedure will be used to design babies with certain characteristics. The man who claims to have accomplished it says it's too late to stop it, and that if he hadn't done it, someone else would have. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Pat, and as Ephraim just alluded to in that package, the big concern is designer babies.
You don't know the consequences. Look, I'm familiar with animals. I mean, really horses and dogs and things like that. But recently, I had a Doberman Pinscher. He was gorgeous. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. He had beautiful ears. He had a beautiful carriage. He was one of the most elegant animals. But what happened was he'd been interbred with various other dogs of the same line. And when he got to be about 5 or 6 years old, he developed a very rare bone disease, and he began to, show symptoms of problems. And before long, I think he had to be put down because they didn't realize what you do when you play God with the genetic makeup of animals and human beings. Now, they're cloning these horses. They've got these polo ponies they're cloning, and you can't tell the difference. Well, that is a replica of the same thing. You're not trying to change it, but you're just trying to reproduce it. But we're going to be talking about epigenetics, and that's a totally different thing where you can alter the behavior of your genes, which isn't the same thing as gene editing, but it's something that we've got to be so careful of because, again, you find more and more dogs that have these hip problems, and they have all kinds of problems. And you have the same thing with horses or cattle or whatever. They interbreed. They try to. They think they know what they're doing. They say, well, we want to get prettier ears. We want to get prettier nostrils. We want to get better flanks or whatever they want to get. And then they wind up not realizing that they have bred into that animal serious genetic problems, and we don't want to have that happen with human beings. John.
Of interview, U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman tells CBN News why President Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem was so significant.
First and foremost, it was the day that I think the United States put itself on the right side of history. I would suggest maybe your audience might agree with me, put itself on the right side of God. It was the day that we recognized really one of the great historical truths of our time. The fact is that everybody recognized Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, but no one did anything about it. President Trump closed the deal. He sided with the truth, and I think that decision has now resonated throughout his foreign policy in all kinds of directions. And I think it was just an extraordinarily important decision for the United States.
And we'll have more Chris Mitchell's interview with Ambassador Friedman on tomorrow's 700 Club and on CBNNews.com. They'll discuss the Trump administration's upcoming peace plan, the growing danger from Iran, and why evangelical support for Israel is so important. Well, NASA's InSight lander not only touched down safely on Mars Monday, it quickly sent back a clear picture of the planet's surface to Earth. The picture was speckled with dirt because the dust cover was still on the lander's camera. Better photos are expected in the days ahead. The NASA spacecraft landed after a perilous supersonic plunge through the planet's red skies after traveling 100 million miles to get there. It was the first successful land on Mars in 6 years. The probe is designed to drill down into the interior of the red planet. Well, could a meteor have destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah? Archaeologists believe they have found evidence of an explosion resulting from a low-altitude meteor strike 3,700 years ago in an area in Jordan. It may have been responsible for destroying cities, villages, and farmland. The director of scientific analysis at the excavation project in Jordan told Science News the explosion instantly killed 40 to 65,000 people and that the temperature from the explosion could have been as hot as the surface of the sun. It took 600 years for the soil to recover before civilization could return to the area. A Biblical Archaeology Review article in 2013 suggested the area is a strong candidate for the location of the ancient city of Sodom. You can find more about how this explosion fits the biblical description of Sodom's destruction on CBNnews.com. Pat, back to you.
Isn't that amazing? Sodom and Gomorrah, everybody figured, oh, it was just a myth, and now we've got scientific proof that it wasn't a lightning bolt, and it wasn't something in the earth. It was actually a meteor, and it was so intense that it melted the sand and it became like glass. I mean, as hot as the sun, and thousands of people died. And, you know, I was thinking about Lot's wife. It says she looked back. Well, I don't think she just turned around and glanced. I think she was lingering and taking her time, because the angel said, get out of that city as fast as you can and head to the mountains. And so Lot and his daughters took off, and the wife was looking, but it was more than just a few seconds of a glance, I think. But she turned into a pillar of salt. But isn't that amazing?
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. We get more and more reports, you know, each year about things that prove
verify the Bible.
accuracy.
Everybody said, oh, it's a bunch of myths. Well, it's not myth, it's fact. And this was, but can you imagine? We thought that some of the sulfur in the area had exploded maybe, but this isn't an explosion. It's an explosion from outer space with tremendous power and unbelievable heat, and killed 40,000, 50,000 people in that whole area. I mean, it wasn't just a little bit. But it's the first one we had one up in the forests of Siberia that was very devastating, but there weren't a lot of people living up there. It was just trees, and they saw that. But these things do hit us, whether we like it or not. So anyhow, just pray that the Lord will look after you. Yeah.